Now it's time to write a bit of code with Spring Data JPA. What I'm gonna do is, we have this airport service injecting an EntityManager and doing some operations with it. I will remove this EntityManager, or at least put it into comment, and everything I have done so far with the EntityManager, now I will do with a repository, a Spring Data repository. First I create this repository, right click new interface, I put it under the repository subpackage, and the name will be airport repository. It should extend the JPA repository interface, and the two type parameters should be airport and long, because airport has a long ID. Okay, now I move back to airport service and inject that one. And where I should persist or merge based on whether it is zero ID or not, I can simply do now a save, because Spring Data doesn't make a distinction between persist and merge, it only has a save method, and save works that way that it contains such logic. It checks whether an empty ID or not, and based on that it calls persist on merge. So it is very easy. Okay, next step, we should be able to check this count by IATA or count by IATA and ID not methods, queries, set parameter, get single result, and so on. What I'm gonna do, I rewrite these queries with simple method name derived queries. So I will have a method returning long, and the name will be count by, count by IATA, string IATA, and this is and it's done. So you see there is now this count by IATA in this named query, but to demonstrate that it works based on method name derivation, I just put them into comment, and here I had this one, but now I'm gonna have count equals airport repository dot count by IATA, and so, and the other one should be very similar, but we should count by IATA and ID not matching a given value. It will look like string IATA and long ID, and here I will add the new method name count by IATA and ID not. The that query will be generated exactly what we need. So I put all this into comment, and I simply call our new repository method and ID not and airport.getID. Okay, we had this find all. It will be very simple because each repository by default has a find all method inherited from the base CRUD repository. So I just call airport repository.findAll, find by ID. This is also something built-in return airport repository dot find by ID. There is just one small thing, that is find by ID returns an optional of airport. We can decide how to go now. We could do not long, so the ID obviously. So find by ID. We could do an or else and return null. That would be equivalent to the original code. Or the other option is that the find by we modify this find by ID so that it returns optional of airport. Now it's less code, and the other parts of the code can remain untouched if I do an or else null, but it could be a valid decision as well that here I return an optional of airport. Okay, how to delete? Airport repository has a delete by ID method, and here I only give the ID and it will be deleted. Okay, let's make a quick test from Postman. Okay, let's find all the airports. I should... oh, internal error. Yes, the problem is what I have forgotten. You can see it in the error. It's a null pointer exception. We want to call airport repository to find all, but airport repository is null. This is simply because I forgot to inject the airport repository. For example, with an auto-wired annotation or with a constructor. After restart it should work. It's not starting. Okay, we see there is exactly one airport in our database from our previous testing. Now let's try to create a new airport. I create airport 2. It succeeded with ID 52. Let's try to create another airport with the same IATA. What happens here? We have this bad request. Very good. Let's try to update an airport, the airport 2, to modify the name, and the IATA should be ABCD. It says it's not found. That's very well, because our second airport, I double check with get all airports, so our second airport doesn't have the ID 2 but 52. So I move back. 52. It was modified. If I get all the airports, it works. If I get one airport by ID, let's say 52, I get it back. If I try a non-existing ID, it gives us a 404 error, and we can try an update with another IATA ABC. It should fail. Bad request, yes, and try to delete an airport with ID 52. This was successful as well, and listing all airports now only gives us the first airport. So it is working. Now let's I want to show one other thing, you remember we had this airport DTO, and here we had some bean validation annotations. So the name cannot be empty, the IATA cannot be empty, and in fact, if I try to create an airport 3 with, let's say, an empty name and with a new valid IATA, it will give us validation failed, name should not be empty, and so on and so on. Why is this working? Just a reminder, in airport controller we have added to this valid annotation, and for this reason it is the web layer, the airport controller, in fact Spring MVC before airport controller, that will evaluate the validation constraints on this airport DTO. But bean validation is integrated with JPA as well. This means if I add some validation annotations here, let's say the name should be between, let's say, 5 and 10 correct, no, let's say 2 and 5 correct characters. Now I do a restart. Obviously, now there is an inconsistency between the validation constraints on the entity and the validation constraints on the DTO. This is something we would like to avoid, but now I would like to demonstrate that if we add the validation constraint here that is not present on the DTO, and so airport controller cannot validate it, but the entity manager will automatically check for validation annotations before saving an entity. So this means if I try to create an airport now with a valid name but with a too long IATA, we will get back a 500 internal server error, could not commit JPA transaction. This is the case where we had this validation constraint violation exception, validation fail for airport during persisting shot, and so on and so on. So when we design our data model, we can add some validation constraints already at entity in the entity layer, and if later at the web layer we forgot about some of these constraints, we are still protected. No invalid data can go into the database. Okay, and the last thing I would like to test is the relationship between entities by simply adding a new entity. It will be called flight. A flight is a flight that operates between two endpoints, between two airports. So add this flight entity. It will be an entity and it will have an ID that will be generated, quite similar to airport. And what else should it have? It should have an airport that represents where it takes off, and another airport called landing, and let's say it should have a flight number, and we can have a takeoff time, for example, local date time, takeoff time. Okay, let's add getters and setters for all of them and add some constructors but don't forget, if we add some custom constructor, we had to add the default constructor as well, because this is needed for a JPA entity. And make this, I do a restart to see what happens now. I expect that JPA will complain about this airport variable, because entity typed fields should, yes, this is it, entity type fields should be annotated with many to one, one to one, or any other. So it could not determine the JDBC type for airport. It doesn't know that it is another entity. So we add many to one annotation here, and and here as well. And now it will be a valid entity. I add many to one because the same airports can be part at multiple flights as takeoff or landing airport. Okay, I add now a repository as well to be able to do something with our flight. I add the flight repository. It extends the JPA repository of flight and long, and maybe I will add a test flight into the database to see how to work with relationships. I just make sure that I have at least 2 airports in the database, and so I create an other airport, or just see how many airports do I have now. I have still not started. Okay, now it started. I have one with ID 1, and now I create a new one, and its ID, it's still not fine. Still a constraint violation. It says the name should be between 2 and 5, not the IATA. I was wrong. So I would rather move this constraint violation, because the pre-existing name is not valid, and this way we could not save it back. So one more last restart. I meant that the IATA should be between 2 and 5 characters. Okay, it's all started. Now I created one with ID 202, so just to quickly have one flight in the database, I move to airport service and add the transactional method that we return as a flight. Let's say create flight, and the long landing ID, the long, let's start with takeoff ID, long takeoff ID, long landing ID, string flight number, and local date time, takeoff time. These will be our parameters. It will be transactional, and now this airport service will have a flight repository as well, which needs to be auto-wired as well, injected. And let's try to find these entities. These should exist. So airport repository.find by ID takeoff ID dot get. This will be the takeoff. Then very similarly with landing ID, and this will be the landing. And now let's create a new flight. Yes, okay, I move back to this constructor of flight because I don't want to specify an ID. I want the ID to be generated, so when I create a new flight, we simply don't want to pass an ID, just the others. So I will have takeoff, landing, flight number and takeoff time. This will be the flight, and use the flight repository to save it, and return with the return value. And now just once I go to the airport application and I will insert, I don't want to write now a REST endpoint for flight, I just make it quick and dirty. Later we will play with the airports in the next chapter longer, so I just want to create a flight. Takeoff ID is 1, landing ID is 202, any flight number ABC 123, and takeoff time should be and let's say today's date. Oh, just now I don't want to specify everything. This is just faster. Now I restart the application, and we should see that an airport, that a flight will be inserted in the database. I move back here. And if I refresh the tables, we will see that we have a flight table, and if we check for the data, we see that in fact this new flight was successfully created, inserted. Here you see the insert into flight command. Okay, that's all I wanted to show.